A couple of months before, I had been sitting at my parents' kitchen table when I was visiting, and I was by myself, and I was working on like a thousand-piece puzzle, just very calm. And suddenly I heard this voice say, "You're gonna die, but you're gonna be okay." And I'm like, "What?" Looking around the room. I don't see anyone there, but I feel very strongly that this voice is someone that I can trust. I don't know how to explain that now. And even though I couldn't see the voice, I started preparing for my death. And,
Mm.
if I do pass in a car accident, then I guess I'm gonna be okay. Never thinking that it would be from my medical stuff because in my mind, I wasn't sick.
Welcome to the Light the Day podcast, where we explore spiritually transformative experiences. I'm your host, Julie Clough, and I want to remind you, if you're new to the podcast, be sure to subscribe and to like and share your comments, share your experiences with listening to the guests because that's super supportive as well. And today I'm super excited to welcome Heather Vandermeyden to the show today, and she has a remarkable story. Hi, Heather.
Hi, how are you?
Good, good. We met at the IONS conference. I know people
Yes.
who have been on the podcast for a while have heard me talk about it before, the International, for some reason, I'm already forgetting, International Association for Near-Death Studies.
Yeah.
And we met through some mutual friends, and I have just loved your story. I have your book right here. And I'm super excited to hear more about your story. So before we get started, share just a little bit about yourself, and then we'll go into your story.
Okay. So again, my name's Heather Vandermeyden. I live in Utah. I am a mom to two kids. They're 20 and 25. And when I was 20 years old, I had multiple near-death experiences during a medical crisis. And it changed everything about my life. It put me on a different path. And since then, I've written a book about it. I'm on the board of directors for the Utah IONS chapter, International Association for Near Death Studies. And I love the group of people I get to work with. It's just an amazing group, and there's so much love and positivity in it. And so I'm very grateful to be part of that.
That is really fun. I know you guys have a really thriving, because I've interviewed a few people from that
Mhm.
chapter, that Utah chapter, and you have a thriving group there, which is
Yeah.
beautiful. And
It's
I'm
fun to work with
jealous.
them.
Because
Yeah.
I'm in Nashville and we don't have anything close by. And so it would be fun to meet in person with people.
It's fun. Yeah, I enjoy it. We have so many people that, fly in from all over the country, and it's also available on Zoom. So if you're not in Utah, you can watch it online. But it's a
That's
great organization.
that's awesome. Love it. Okay, so tell us oh my goodness, you had medical emergencies at 20 years old. I just
Yeah.
can't even imagine what that must have been like for you. So just kind of take us into that story of what happened.
Okay. Yeah, I was completely healthy, and about the age of 19, I got heartburn. And it was like this massive heartburn like I'd never had before. I couldn't sleep, I couldn't sit up or lay down or anything without being in pain. And over the next couple of weeks, it got worse. It went to my digestive system, and I couldn't eat, and I started losing weight, and I was going to multiple specialists trying to figure out what was wrong. And about a year into it, I was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis, which is basically your large intestine. Your body fills with inflammation, and it just doesn't work anymore. Usually, you can go into remission. You can get on, prednisone, steroids, and medication, and go into remission and live a healthy life. And I could not get into remission no matter what. I was on really heavy duty medications. Some of them were leukemia medications, trying to get into remission, and it wasn't working. So I was in and out of the hospital quite a bit as my weight got down to 94 pounds. I was quite sick. And at the same time, I was very much in denial that I was sick. I thought, oh, it's a bad cold. I'll be fine. And I
Wow.
downplaying significantly how sick I really was because I was scared. And I didn't think that I could be going from this healthy person to this person that was literally dying overnight. So I went into complete denial with it.
Yeah, I can imagine. 20 years old,
I was
19,
young,
20.
yeah,
My gosh.
barely
That's
married, I was supposed to be living my best life, and I was so sick.
So you were married at this time.
Yeah, I was. I've been married for about a year. I was married for about a year before I got sick. Well, about 8 months, I guess. And so I was, in the honeymoon chapter, or whatever, but very, very sick. And so I ended up quitting my job because I couldn't function. I couldn't work, 8 to 10 hour day. I was so weak. I wasn't getting any nutrients in my body. So I was losing rapid weight, having really heavy fevers and night sweats. I was passing out a lot. I would find myself with my head at the bottom of the stairs, my feet up in the air,
Oh
at
my
my
word.
down the stairs, broke my tailbone at one point. It was really scary. I couldn't even drive because I would pass out so much. And during one of those episodes, I punctured or like both of my lungs collapsed. And I thought it was bad back pain, so I waited a week to go to the doctor, thinking, your back's really hurting, but that's all it is. I'm taking Tylenol and hot baths, and it's not working. So severe denial. And I look back now and think, oh my gosh, that was really stupid. But I was seeing a specialist. I was really trying to get healthy. And then in December of 1999, I ended up in the hospital a couple of times with high fevers. And the last time was December 20th. And when I went in, the ER doctor that saw me decided to keep me in the hospital. And I, to this day, don't know what made him decide to keep me, but it saved my life. I had been telling him, no, I'm just fine. I just have a fever and just give me some antibiotics and send me home. And he looked through my medical records and said, no, you've been here a lot. Your specialist said you may need surgery to remove your large intestine. And that's why I wasn't wanting to stay. I was scared. I didn't want to have surgery. I didn't want a colostomy bag. I was just so scared. So he ended up keeping me. They did a bunch of imaging tests and blood work and decided that I had about 24 hours left to live. And
Wow.
if they could remove my large intestine, I would die. It was um, just completely shredded, basically, perforated, and it was putting toxins into my body. So the surgeon came into the room and he said, we're going to do surgery. And I was like, no, I'm good. I have a family Christmas party. Let me go to that. I want to see my family and I can come back after. We can talk, but I don't think I need surgery.
Oh,
And
yeah.
he,
So I just have to tell you, I'm kind of laughing. I'm chuckling to myself a little bit because I got sick around the same age. And they had put me in the hospital because my system was not working correctly and they needed to do surgery. And they put me in the hospital so they could get my body ready for surgery. And I remember telling, this is so funny because it reminds me of what you're saying. I remember the surgeon coming in, the doctor coming in, and I'm like, why am I here? Like, I feel fine. I just need to go home, Same
yeah,
age, right? Same age.
yeah, you're
And
invincible.
he's like, you've been sick for so long, you don't even know what fine is. I will
Yeah,
never forget him saying that.
I know. I remember to this day, the doctor's looking at me, my surgeon, and I'm sure he's thinking she is completely insane. I mean, here I am, 94 pounds. You can see my knees, like there's no fat on my body. And I'm just shaking because the fevers are, 105. And
Wow.
my blood work was just horrible. And I'm like, no, I'm good. Let's go to that party. And I hadn't finished my Christmas shopping. And that's what upset me the most. I knew I needed to get that done because that was something I could think about and have control over, I guess. There was no control of my
Yeah.
health, so I was focusing on
Yeah.
other things.
Yeah. Easier to focus on Christmas shopping and things like
Yeah.
that than to think that you might be dying at
Yeah.
20.
And
That's
it's funny to me because a couple of months before I had been sitting at my parents' kitchen table when I was visiting and I was by myself and I was working on like a 1,000 piece puzzle, just very calm. And suddenly I heard his voice say, you're gonna die, but you're gonna be okay. And I'm like, what? Looking around the room. I don't see anyone there, but I feel very strongly that this voice is someone that I can trust. I don't know how to explain that now. And even though I couldn't see the voice, I started preparing for my death in
mm,
car accident. Obviously, I'm not going to die from being sick. And so I didn't tell anyone because I'm a pretty level-headed person. If I, say, hey, this unknown voice told me I'm going to die, so I got to get ready. That was just not me. But
right.
I felt like I could trust it. So I did kind of prepare in my mind, if I do pass in a car accident, then I guess I'm going to be okay. Never thinking that it would be from my medical stuff because in my mind, I wasn't sick. So when they wheeled me into surgery, because obviously I ended up having surgery, my family was like, well, she can't decide for herself. We'll decide for her. And they wheeled me into surgery, and I've never been so scared in my entire life. I mean, I was shaking so heavily, and surgery rooms are cold. And I'm thinking this must be when I die. And so
Mm.
when I woke up out of surgery in the recovery room, I was still alive. And I thought, huh, that's weird. So, the first thing I do is move my hand to see if my stomach, has had surgery, and there's a colostomy bag attached to it. And I'm in tons of pain. There's a huge incision, 8-inch incision on my stomach.
Wow.
And I was upset. I was mad that my body had failed me first off, but I was also scared and embarrassed. I had this bag hanging off my body and that I wasn't fully healthy anymore. And, just it really changed my life in a scary way. But over the next couple of days, the goal was to keep me for a couple of days until I was calm enough, healthy enough to go home. And then I would come back and do another surgery once my insides healed. And
Hmm.
I would do what's called a J pouch. They remove the colostomy bag, and then they take your small intestine and loop it at the bottom and hook you back up, and that becomes your large intestine. Basically, it does the work of both. So that was the goal. On New Year's Eve, I'm still in the hospital. It's Y2K, if you remember that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they're waiting for all the computers to shut down, and are the machines going to shut down? I'm on some different medical equipment machines.
Wow.
So I had my family there, and my family and friends were amazing through this. They were always there. They really went above and beyond. I'm so grateful for that. But I had a couple of family members in the room, and the nurses came in to check my incision and, check my vitals and all that good stuff. And they were standing on both sides of the bed, and suddenly I felt like my body was like, I felt like the bed actually was rising up to their shoulder height. And I thought, that's really weird. Why do they need me so high in the air if they're working on me? They've never done that before. And they finished what they were doing and left the room, and the bed was still up in my mind, up in the air. And then suddenly I felt it was floating down, and I was really confused. And I thought, this is not normal. Like, the bed doesn't do this. So I didn't say anything to anyone because I was quite confused. And at this point, I was not on any narcotics. I hate the feeling of narcotics. They make me sick to my stomach. I'm allergic to morphine. I did have a morphine pump, but I would not use it. The nurses would have to push it. So at this point, there was no narcotics in my body. After they left and I went back down on the bed,
Mm.
nothing happened again. Y2K was done and I was fine. And then on January 3rd, my doctor came in to check my incision, and my um, small intestine had come out of my stomach and was in my colostomy bag, which is not good. It's an
No.
emergency. So I was rushed immediately back into surgery, and they, put everything back in, cleaned me up, brought me back out. And then a week later, I had the same thing happen again. It's called a small bowel evisceration. So basically, back into surgery a third time. And at this point, it's been a little over a week, or maybe a week and a half, and I've had 3 major surgeries, and my body just couldn't handle it.
No.
I
Your body was already compromised
It
before the
was,
surgeries.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been sick for so long and so malnourished. I mean, there was nothing to me. So when that third surgery happened, they put me into shock trauma, which is like the very, very critical care part of the hospital. And that's when everything changed over the next 3 weeks. Oh, wow. It was, for me, it was kind of magical, but for everyone else, it was pretty traumatic. But once they did the surgery, my body started to shut down, and I developed acute respiratory distress syndrome, called ARDS for short. And my body went septic. Inner abdominal sepsis is what it is. So basically, my entire body filled with sepsis, and I couldn't breathe. My oxygen levels got really low, and it felt like my heart was like beating out of my chest. And I knew that there was something seriously wrong. I mean, at this point, I was past the denial stage. I knew that I was going to die. I was terrified. And my mom was in the room, and I was telling her, help me, help me. I can't breathe. And there was about 8 critical care nurses trying to stabilize me. And they told my family, let's move you out of the room. So my mom had gone to get my supplies from one of my other rooms I'd been in, and just my dad was there. And if you know my dad, he's a very quiet person. He doesn't talk much, but he was in there watching the nurses from the side and he heard his name, Craig. And
Mm,
he looked around and there was no one talking to him. All the nurses were very busy with me. They didn't know his name, they were new nurses. And he said yes. And it was a female voice. And there was no one there that answered. And he was writing a journal about what was happening as I was there to kind of keep track. And he wrote in there that he realized the voice was not of this earth. And
mm.
I assume it was my grandmother there to comfort him. But they had him leave the room, and my parents, my in-laws were there. They went out to the waiting area, and suddenly there's the nurses with my hospital bed running at a fast pace with me, and I looked dead. And so they thought I had died. And honestly, I was so critical. I'm surprised I was alive. My oxygen levels were so low. So they were taking me to a room to intubate me and stabilize me, resuscitate. And once I got to that room, the next thing I remember, I'm sitting off to the side and I'm in these like, I just think of them as stadium seats, kind of like cement round half seats, like if you're watching a rodeo or something. And off to
Mhm.
the right, there was a nurses station with a couple of nurses, and they were just working. They were minding their own business. They weren't bothering me. They didn't see me, and I didn't seem concerned that they didn't see me. And then I looked off to my left, and there was a hospital bed with nurses all around it, and a girl. You could kind of see as they were moving back and forth. It was pretty chaotic, but you could kind of see that there was a young girl on the bed, and that she was really, really in bad shape.
So just to be clear, so you've left your body and you're seeing this and you're okay.
But I
Okay.
didn't realize the girl was me. I
Wow.
watched her probably a good 5 minutes thinking, this poor kid, she's pretty young. She doesn't look very well. I feel bad for her. It was like watching a movie, and I never, ever thought she was me. And so I didn't have any emotional attachment to the body. It was just a scene to watch to keep me busy in a way.
That's so interesting. I've heard other people talk about it that way. And
Yeah.
that just is like it's so
It's
it's
weird,
hard
right?
to
Yeah.
understand,
Yeah.
from our perspective, because if I look in a mirror, I know it's me, right?
Yeah, yeah. Like we're so tied to our bodies. It's everything about us, and when you're
Yeah.
on your body, you could care less. It's like a shell and you have no attachment whatsoever. I didn't care if I ever went back into the body. In fact, I didn't want to because where I was this immense love. It was like this warm, welcoming love. And oh, it was just gorgeous. And I didn't have any pain. I was completely free of pain. I didn't have any worries. There was no anxiety. And I thought I could stay here forever. And it was almost like this yellow light around me, a different golden hues of light. And I could feel the emotions of the nurses. Like I could understand what they were thinking, and they were pretty scared. And I could, I knew that they were thinking this girl's so young and she's gonna die on our watch. And the girl, me, was terrified because it was so hard to breathe. It's like if an elephant's sitting on your chest and you're trying to breathe and you can't. You're just using all of your might to try and keep yourself alive. And that's what the girl was doing. And so I watched for quite a while. And then suddenly I woke up and the room was dark and I was back in my body and I had tubes in my mouth. I was intubated. My hands were tied down and there was a nurse next to me. And I was really confused. And this happened a couple of times, as anesthesia was wearing off. I'd wake up and fall back asleep. And I guess what had happened is I was trying to pull my tubes out because I
Mm.
didn't understand what they were, and they were quite uncomfortable. If you have a big, straw like gummy tube down your throat, it's not great. So your first instinct is to pull it out. So they tied my hands down, and then they had a nurse next to the bed trying to keep me from doing that. And he was very abusive during my hospital stay, and I write about him in the book. I was not nice about it. I mean, I he caused a lot of nightmares and trauma that took quite a bit of therapy to get over. But that was in the shock trauma unit. And so over the next 3 weeks, I left my body multiple times. It was this amazing experience. And I can't do it now. It was only for 3 weeks, but I had multiple experiences. And it got to a point where I could actually just think about it and I could leave my body. But the first time after this time, I was in my bed and it was dark. It was, kind of probably 8 o'clock at night. I don't know. And I was by myself. I could see the light from the door. I was across from the nurse's station. And suddenly it felt like my soul jumped out of my body and I was in this dark tunnel. And I was going at the speed of light and it was terrifying. I've never moved so fast in my life. And there was a man standing right in front of me and he was lit in light. Like he kind of glowed. He had these beautiful, dark brown eyes, um, kind of a tannish complexion with dark hair and a beard and a mustache, and a top hat on and a suit. And he looked like he was from the 1800s. And I remember even in this panic thinking, he's dressed really weird for this time. And he didn't ever say anything. I felt very comforted by him. I wasn't scared of him. And he would just look at me. And he had these really soulful eyes. I felt just love from him. But because we were moving so fast and I didn't know what was happening, it would scare me and I'd pop back in my body and then it would happen again. And it happened quite a few times over 3 days. And finally, my nurses realized I wasn't sleeping and they sedated me. They gave me a shot to sedate me. And that stopped. I wasn't leaving my body anymore after that, which I was glad. I couldn't explain to anyone what was happening because I couldn't write anything. I couldn't communicate. I was ventilated.
Right.
It was really scary for me. I felt very alone in that room because I couldn't tell anyone what was happening. And so the next experience, at this point, I have 107.5-degree fever and the nurses are packing me in ice and I'm freezing to death. And there's fans going. They've got wet compresses on my head trying to get the fevers down. They won't give me a blanket. And I'm thinking they're so mean, but I realize now, obviously, it was very, very necessary to get the fevers down as fast as possible. And so I'm in my body and suddenly I pop out and I'm in this area of water. Or it's a building, actually, we'll start there, I guess. But the building was like very ancient. It had holes in the front of it. It kind of reminded me of like ancient Greece or Jerusalem, something like that.
Yeah.
I could feel this person with me behind my shoulder, an energy. I could tell it was male. I didn't know who it was. And I wanted to be in the building. And suddenly I'm in the building. I don't even walk through the front door. I'm just in the entrance of the building. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I still have my earthly thoughts. I'm like, this is the coolest thing ever. I just went through a wall, and I'm thinking this, but I'm in the entrance way with this person and I'm watching what's happening around me. There's people reading books, they're sitting in chairs. And I suddenly find myself in this room and it's round and very, very, very tall. Thousands and thousands of books are in the bookcases. And there's a table that has scrolls and there's no ceiling. It just goes forever. And this person with me, who I call my guide now, he's opening these scrolls and they have ancient writing. And I'm understanding what I'm reading. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this is so cool. I could be here forever. I love to read. This is the most amazing place ever. And again, every time I pop out of my body, there's no pain, no worry, there's no time. I'm just in my own little bubble. And so I don't know how long I was in there, but I know I read many of the books. And then I was told that I wouldn't remember what I'd read. And that
Mm.
makes me really sad. Um,
Yeah, that was going to be my next question.
yeah,
What did you bring back from your
I
studies?
don't know. I think it was the Akashic Records.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know what was in there. And I'm sure that it was, stuff that wouldn't, I think if I would have known what that information was, maybe it would have not helped me here because I had such a desire to stay on the other side. And I was told at one point during this that I would have a bunch of my memories taken from me. And I know that's because I really, really struggled to come back and stay fully in my body. And
Uh,
the experiences I had were so amazing that I can't imagine what was taken from me, but it must have been something that would have made it even harder to come back because if I was
yeah.
given the choice, I would have stayed forever there and I wouldn't have worried about my family. In my mind, they would have been fine, and I just needed to stay there. So I think that's why those memories were taken. But after
Yeah.
we read through the books, I found myself back in the beginning of the entrance, and off to my right was a podium, like if you're in a speaking conference, and there was a table, kind of like a desk attached to it. And I thought it was weird there was no chairs for people to listen to whoever was speaking, but there was no one speaking. And I felt this like magnetic pull towards the podium. And after I thought that, my body starts gliding towards it. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I am gliding, still have my earthly thoughts. I'm like, this is the coolest thing ever. And as I got closer to the podium, it kind of moved to the left, and there were stairs that we could go down. And I didn't have any worry about going down into this office basement. To me, it was like, oh, let's try this. And in life, I don't like basements, they freak me out. So, but my guide and I went down the stairs, and when we got to the bottom, it was full of pools of water and rivers and ponds and waterfalls. It was amazing. I mean, every time I think about it, it brings back this love in my heart. And there was a pool of water in front of us. In this room, to explain it better, it was very ancient looking, like sandstone on the walls. The rocks and the stone were all just very ancient. There was no electricity, there was no plumbing. The lighting came from the windows at the top. And I was not the only one there. There were other people in the water. But I saw this pool in front of me, and I knew I needed to be in it. And as soon as I thought that, I was in the water. And I kind of had my arms up on the edge of it to kind of hold me in place. And it was really, really deep. There, I don't know where the bottom was. And if you know me, I love water, but I'm also terrified of drowning, and I'm not a good swimmer. So the fact that I just was so calm to be in this water and not think, you might drown, I to me, I call this area the ancient healing waters.
Mm.
Um, I know without a doubt that this water helped heal me. And it didn't save me right away. I didn't go back and I was 100% better. But I think I was so critical at that point that the other side knew they needed to give me something to help me, help my body a little bit. And so I just sat in the water and watched the people that were around there. And I knew instinctively that this place was for only specific people, that you had to be very pure to be there, um, almost like a certain energy level. It wasn't like it was telling people you're a bad person, you can't be here. It was, you had to be energetically to that area to be able to be there is probably the best way to describe it. And I would go there multiple times, and every time I felt it just heal my body that was in my bed. And the most interesting part to me was that even though I was in the water, it wasn't getting my hair wet. Like I could have gotten out of the water and I wouldn't have been wet, but I would sit with my hands like this and just rub the water back and forth kind of. And I can still hear the sound of the water lapping against the side. It was really, really calming. And so that was, I mean, out of all my experiences, that was my absolute favorite. To this day, I still love water. In the summertime, I just want to be at the pool or in the lakes or rivers all the time because it kind of brings back some of that sense of
Yeah.
healing love that I
I
have
love
in
water too, so I can really
it. Yeah,
appreciate that. Yeah, for
I
sure.
really think that water's healing for everyone. But that was my favorite experience. But at one point, I'd kind of pop back and forth for my body, and when I was the fever was quite high at one point, I found myself in this room. It was really tall ceilings again, and it was kind of like different colors of whites and golds. And there was this older couple, a man and a woman, and that's like grandparents kind of. And I went over to talk to them, and they told me that they were angels that ministered to the patients in the hospital in the shock trauma unit.
Oh wow. And you met them in this building, in
It was
this like
so
heavenly building?
yeah, it was like a heavenly room. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Interesting.
and I think so my thing is I think that we're closer to heaven than we think we are. Like a lot of people think it's in the sky. I think it's among us. And so this room was for me, I think it was in the shock trauma unit. We just can't see it with our earthly eyes.
Makes
But
sense.
yeah, so they were sitting on kind of a bench, and so I went and spoke with them and asked who they were. And on the other side, you speak telepathically. It's not, you don't use your words. You communicate with your mind. And they told me that they were ministering to the patients and asked if I wanted to go with. And I was like, yeah, let's do this. And so we went to different rooms, and I kind of knew some of my neighbors, if you will, my hospital neighbors, because the nurses would say little things about them, or my family would talk to their family. And so I kind of knew what was going on with some of the other patients. And one
Hmm.
of them, actually, he had the same thing I had. So he'd been to visit me. in my hospital room a couple of times. And so going to see the different patients was really kind of cool. And they told me that they were there to help the patient, but also the families of the patients. And so if the patient was meant to pass on, that they would see God and God would let them know that it was that patient's time to pass on. And
Mhm.
at one point, there was a door to the room and there was a glass window in the top, and the face of God appeared. And my background, I was raised very, very strict religious Mormon, and I pushed away from it. I didn't want that strict religion, and I kind of, wasn't spiritual like my family was, I guess you could say. And so it kind of shocked me at first that I saw him because that's not who I would have expected. But as soon as I saw his face, it was like this amazing homecoming. And every time I talk about it, I cry. I try not to. But he knew me so profoundly, and I knew him. And I knew him from before I'd been in my body. And I knew that he understood my struggles and that there was a reason for it and that he loved me and that he didn't just love me, he loved every one of his children. And that was such a gift of knowledge to have because I had been pretty angry when I became sick that I was having to struggle and go through this. And I felt like, why wasn't I being cured? And to see him and know that there was a reason for it helped me tremendously to know that it wasn't just some random act of vengeance or something.
Yeah.
He had these beautiful blue eyes and kind of iridescent hair and just kind of a clean cut, hair and beard and mustache. And I've had people ask me, do you think that's what he always looks like? And I don't. I think he came in the form of energy that I would recognize his face maybe, but I think he could have come to me as a young child or an older person, and I would have understood his energy and known him. But
Do
he
you
doesn't have,
think it has to do with what you would feel comfortable with? Because it sounds like
yeah,
when you're on the other side, it's just like this peace, this love, this safety. I don't get a impression that at any time you felt scared or worried, other than moving really quickly and
yeah. And
going,
that
what's
was more
going on?
like if you stick your head out the window and your face go, oh, when you're driving really fast in a car, that's what that was like. But yeah,
Yeah,
there's never any worry. I felt completely enveloped in love every time I left my body, like the most immense love you can ever imagine every time I left. And so, yeah, I think he just came in the way that maybe I would see him. But at other times, I'd seen other spirits and ancestors, and they were just lit in like a bright light, and I couldn't even see their faces, but I knew who they were. So it's
hmm
not like I needed to see their faces to know who they were. I felt their energy.
yeah,
But seeing him there, it really gave me this sense that I was going to be okay and that there was a reason for what was happening. It didn't make it any easier when, I'm in intense pain to think, well, down the line, you're not going to hurt. Because at that moment, the pain was pretty bad. But I knew that it wasn't a forever thing.
yeah. And I want to highlight this because, like you said, like every time you talk about it, it just brings up the emotion.
Yeah.
And
The
um,
love. Yeah.
yeah, and from what you're saying, it's like before all this happened, you kind of pushed against the kind of the your
Yeah.
religious culture,
Yeah.
I'm not sure what you thought about God before this experience. If did you still believe in God before
I
this?
did.
But you just
Yeah.
was like, you, but then I imagine that you were taught growing up that you've got to do this, this, and this in order to be okay with God. Otherwise, God was going to be angry. And I'm
Yeah.
guessing you're
Yeah. There's
not
one
feeling
quote.
any of
Yeah.
that.
I actually used to run away during church services and hide in the bathroom or outside because I didn't want to go to the classes. I'm kind of a very stubborn person, and for whatever reason, it didn't vibe with me. And I loved the people that were in our church, and I didn't feel like that was my place. I don't know how to explain it. I just didn't feel fully comfortable there. And since then, I have left organized religion, and I find my peace in nature. And I think some people really need religion, and it's great. And I have no problem with it. I have many, many loved ones that are very religious, and I respect that. I think for me, though, I needed something that was more um, like being in nature and feeling the love from the other side. It changed the way I seeked um, love. And I still pray every day. I truly believe in prayer. I think it's like balls of light when we pray that go up, that the angels grab our guides and they try to help us the best they can. And even if they don't answer our prayers the way that we want them to, I definitely think prayer is very, very much necessary.
Hmm.
So I still consider myself very spiritual. I just don't have religion as much in play as I did before.
Yeah.
But I've always, I always knew that there was a God in Jesus, or Heavenly Father, whatever you want to call him, source.
Yeah.
But seeing him there, it really was incredible to know that he understood me and loved me. And I wasn't special. I was everyone. He loves everyone. I mean, we're all special to him, but it wasn't like he wasn't loving everyone else as well. And so that was really amazing to know that he really does care about us.
I imagine it's so challenging, like writing your book, sharing your story. I know I have parts of my story. It's like that I'll share and I'll be like, I just wish they could feel what I
Yeah.
feel, right? And so
How do
I
you
imagine
communicate
it's just,
it?
what's that?
How do you communicate it? It's so
Yeah,
we're limited. Our bodies
very
and
limited.
our communication is very dense. And we don't realize it when we're in our body. But yeah, when I started writing the book, my editor's like, I knew that there's more in there. And I was like, this is really hard to put into words, because I can see it in my mind, but how do you put something that you can feel into a book? And then it was like it just came together and I thought, yeah, that's I want people to feel the love that I felt. And I
Yeah.
never planned on writing about it ever. I never planned on talking about it. But I wanted my kids to know the story because at one point in the hospitalization, there were these two spirits, two children that would come to my hospital bed with an older man. And I didn't know who they were. I didn't have kids at the time. But I would tell my family all the time that they were there. Like my family, I was telling them stuff like, I was just with grandma, or, I would just tell them stuff that was happening. So they knew what was going on, and they know that I'm not the type of person that makes up weird stuff. And so if I was saying it, it was accurate. But these children would appear all the time for like about a week. And we started joking about it, saying, well, who are they? They're not my kids. And I tell my mom, they're here again. Do you see them? She's like, nope, I don't see them. And so I tell her what they
I
look like.
actually highlighted part of
Yeah.
that in your book. Yeah, that.
She still laughs about it because she's like, I didn't see anything, but you were so adamant, they're right there. Like, why don't you see them? And so she said that I would tell her, they're like the little boy's blonde curly hair and the little girl's blonde straight hair. And then she'd ask who the man is. Is it your grandpa? And I'd say, I don't know. I don't know who he is. And he didn't always show up, the man, but we didn't, again, know who these children were. And obviously, I've got dark hair. My husband at the time was darker. There's no way we were gonna have blonde kids. Like, just it wasn't a thing. And so after about a week, they just didn't show up anymore, and we kind of put it on the back burner. And I found out years later who those kids were. And we can talk about that after we get past the medical stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, I loved my body quite a bit. Like at one point, I wanted to know that my house and my husband were okay because I'd been in the hospital. I ended up being there 3 months, and I didn't feel like I had a house to go back to. I felt like I was going to live at the hospital forever, and it was a really damaging feeling, very depressing. I was in a dark place.
Yeah.
One night after the nurses left from checking vitals, I found myself out of my body and like I was just flying through the sky. It was dark and I could see underneath, my hospital room was in Salt Lake City, Utah, and I could tell where I was. And I'm like, wow, this is really cool. That didn't scare me because by this point, understood leaving my body and stuff. And suddenly I'm in the entrance to my house and I had a split level house and I'm above the front door in the entranceway and I can see my cats. I had two cats. They were at the top of the stairs and they were asleep. I was like, oh, good. He's feeding him. That's good. And I heard the guide say, do you want to check on your husband? I was like, yeah, let's do it. And so I'm floating down the hall towards my bedroom and I'm thinking, wow, this is, again, really cool that I can float. I wish I could always do this. And when I got to the room, he was asleep. He was laying on his side and he had his blankets. And he has this it was a stupid baby blanket called Blue Blanks. We always joked about it. He had it kind of around his head. So you could see kind of like from here down, just kind of wrapped around his head while he was sleeping. And I checked on him for a few minutes. And I kind of felt like, okay, I do have a home to return to. And then I heard my guide say, your nurses are coming back. You need to return. And boom, I was back in my body. And the nurses came in. And that little reprieve gave me the thought, okay, you do have a life once you leave the hospital. You're not always going to be here. There's a lot that needs to be done to get you back to where you need to be, but it was kind of
Yeah.
a little gift if, there's a life for you. And so, I told him about that later on, and he was able to confirm that he was in that same position, So it was kind of fun to tell my family things that would happen and then them be able to validate it. I
Yeah.
had a aunt that passed away like about a year before, well, maybe 2 years before, and she'd been pretty sick when she passed. Just this little tiny lady. She wasn't even 5 feet. And one day, boom, she pops into the hospital room. And I was like, hey, it's good to see you. And she said, do you want to come to my house? Her husband was still living. And she had lived across the street from my grandparents. That's how my parents met, was my mom's aunt. And so we go into the living room, and her husband's there, and he's probably in his late 70s. And the house was exactly as it was when she had passed away. And I spent a lot of time there growing up. So it was a very familiar house. Still had the shag carpet, orange countertops, like dark wood. It was very, very 70s. And she says, look in the hallway. And I look in their hallway and I see a scene of my uncle falling down and not being able to get up and passing from his injuries. And it really upset me because he lived by himself. And I thought, I don't want him to spend his last few minutes by himself. And I don't want him to be scared. I could feel his terror that he knew that he didn't have anyone coming to help him. And after I got back into my body in my hospital bed, I was trying to tell my family, you need to go check on him. But I was on a ventilator still. And I was so weak that I couldn't write very well. It was hard to write even a letter. I just didn't have the ability. I shook really heavily from all the medication that was in my body and the fevers and stuff. And so it took about 3 days. And somehow I finally wrote his name on a piece of paper, and I just kept pointing at it like, his name's Harry. I was like, Harry. So my family sent my grandpa across the street to check on him. And he came up afterwards because they could tell I was really upset. And he said, he's fine. Like he was just watching TV and he's good. I, asked him if he was okay. And he said he'd keep checking on him. And I was like, okay, that's really, really weird that I saw so specifically him dying. I wonder why it hasn't happened. And about 15 years after that scene, my mom called me and said he had fallen in the hallway and he had passed from his injuries.
Oh, wow.
And it was the same place that I'd seen him. So for me, that validated again that I was on the other side. I never questioned it, but it was kind of a validation for my family, I guess, more so. But it also brought in the thought of time is very different. There's no
Yeah.
time on the other side whenever I was there.
So I was going to ask you about, yeah.
There's no time. And I'm the type of person that I am very, very aware of time on the side. Like if I have an appointment to get to, I'm going to show up 10 minutes early because I don't want to be late. And I'm constantly looking at the time to make sure that I have the ability to do what I need to do in that time. On the other side, I didn't care. I really it didn't ever cross my mind. It was almost like you're in this vacuum of no air, I guess. And so um, the 15 years to me, it was interesting because what felt like something that should have happened immediately, it didn't. It was a long time later, but it did still happen. So for me, it's almost like when you pray for something, it takes a long time to happen. Maybe that's why there's just a
Yeah.
difference of time for them. But back in my hospital room, every day I had to walk, and they left my stomach open. It was an 8-inch incision. Every time I had a couple of surgeries after the first three. I had really bad infection in my stomach, and they'd have to go in and remove liters of infection. But every day I'd have to walk. So I have this open 8-inch incision because my stomach had started to shred the skin. They couldn't close it. And they'd pack it with packing. And, I have the colostomy bag. I've got all my
My word.
medical equipment. Yeah, I was a mess. It took about 10 minutes to get me into a wheelchair and get the medical equipment ready to have me walk. and then they would have someone on both sides to help me, and I have my walker. They didn't want to have any blood clots. And during one of the surgeries, I had lost the ability to walk. My left side became paralyzed, and so they pretty much dragged me around, trying to get me to walk. They'd lift the leg and stuff. But at one point, my nurse Brian was sitting me up on my bed to get me to walk, and he had his hands on my shoulders to hold me in a sitting position. I couldn't sit on my own, and my mom was standing to the side of him. She was going to walk with us, and suddenly I'm like out of my body. I'm behind him in this hallway with these like windows, and they're kind of oval shaped, like kind of like this.
Hmm.
And there's window seats on them, and they just go forever. And at the end, there's this bright light, and I'm standing there right behind him in this area, watching him, and he's snapping his fingers like this in my face, saying, "Heather, Heather, come back, come back, Heather, come back." And if you know me, I have a kind of twisted sense of humor. I was like, "No, thank you. I'm good. I'm gonna stay here." I'm thinking if I don't go back, I can maybe stay here forever, and I don't have to go back into that body that I hate, that shell of me. And as I'm thinking this, I can feel that he's freaking out completely. And my poor mom, I mean, she
Mm-hmm.
had started praying that I would die because I was so sick. And she didn't see me ever being able to come back from this and knew that was not something I would want. And so I could feel her terror. She was so scared. And as I'm feeling this, my guide says, "You need to go back." And so I'm in my mind thinking, okay, I'll go back for now and then I'll pop out again later when I can. And so as I thought that I'm back in my body, and my nurse looks at me and he says, "We lost you there for a minute." And I said, "Yeah." I shook my head like, "Yeah, I know." And then, it's always questions. They'd always ask questions like, "Who's the president of the United States? Do you know what day it is?" Just different things throughout the experience to see if your brain cognitive was there still. But I talked to my mom about it a couple of years ago when I started writing the book. I said, "What do you remember about that?" And she pretty much said word for word what I had I had seen, but from her own viewpoint, it was really traumatizing for her. She still, to this day, cannot handle hearing what happened without crying. It was really, really hard for her. And she was my age as I am now when this happened, and I was the age of my daughter. I don't feel like I am emotionally adult enough to handle that situation. So I really give props to my parents for having the ability to handle something so scary.
Yeah.
They really were stood up to that. And I had my brothers around, and my best friend was there all the time. So I was surrounded by family. Um,
Mhm.
I was really lucky in that point.
Yeah. I
But
know in the book you talked, I know about visiting with your grandma on the other side, like that she would visit you.
yeah,
And were there other family members?
there were, yeah. So
Yeah.
at one point I had been with my grandma and I came back and I said, my grandma said I'm gonna be fine. I just need to eat.
Yeah. I highlighted, I actually underlined that. You're going to be fine. You just need to eat.
Yeah. And I think that was like the dumbed down version of what she said because that actually did help. I was on a feeding tube throughout the experience, and then when I got out, I was off the feeding tube, and I couldn't keep food in. I wasn't digesting it correctly. I think that the opening to my stomach had shrunk and I couldn't eat. So I got down to 79 pounds. And so really my doctor would say, give her 2 milkshakes a day, take her to Golden Corral twice a day. And I would literally eat like a bite of a piece of bread. And so I've been vegetarian since I was 12. And my mom, she was taking chicken and blending it and putting it in my food.
Oh, wow.
And she didn't tell me, obviously, my brothers a couple of years later told me, and I was like, she wouldn't do that. And she's like, oh, I did. I was trying to fatten you up and you didn't eat it anyway, so it's okay. But yeah, I did have a lot of family around that had passed that were with me throughout the experiences. At one point, I found myself in my grandparents' backyard, the ones that lived across from my uncle, and my grandpa was still alive. And this yard, I spent my entire childhood there with my cousins, my grandparents. They lived about a couple blocks from my house, so I'd walk over there all the time. So being there is like, oh, this is so comforting to be back somewhere that I feel so safe. And suddenly there are these orbs that are just kind of like they're floating across the backyard from the right to the left. And There were different sizes. Some were the size of basketballs, some were, the size of golf balls, but they were all filled with like this glittery type substance. They glowed almost, kind of like a lava lamp. And there's three of them, and they had faces in them. One was my grandma, and she had passed about a year before this. And then there's my aunt, that I'd seen, and then my great grandfather, who is my grandma's father.
Mm,
And they looked of the age when they passed away, but they looked healthy. They kind of glowed. They were very vibrant, and I could just see kind of like from here up of them in these orbs, and then the orbs just kind of danced, almost like they floated to the left, and then they disappeared. And the thing I remember about that the most, besides seeing them and being so comforted, it was very quiet. It was like we were in a snow globe. There was no noise. There were no dogs barking, and the sky was very dark, but there were tons and tons of stars. And I just felt so suspended in love. And
mm,
so I would tell my family, I just was with great grandpa or grandma. At one point, I I call it the entrance to heaven. Maybe others think of it differently, but there was no gates or anything. But there were thousands and thousands of souls on each side of this entrance. And to me, it kind of looked like clouds, but it wasn't clouds. And I thought, we're not falling through. It's not clouds, but it was a very soft um, area that we were in. Soft is probably a weird way to explain it, but there were golden colors and hues and iridescent whites. And it was just a very quiet, comforting place. And all these spirits were dressed in these beige robes, and they all glowed. I couldn't see their faces. They're all different heights, and they were so packed together because there were so many of them. And I just knew it was the entrance to heaven. And I thought to myself, I'm going to tell my guide that I'm going to see my grandma in her garden because I knew if I got past a certain point, I didn't have to come back and I would effectively die and I could stay there. And that was my goal. It was
mm.
the biggest race I'd ever been in, and I knew I needed to get past that, and I would do anything possible to do that. And my guide's with me, and I laugh about it every time I think about it now because you're telepathically communicating. He knew what I was thinking. I didn't have to like tell him out loud or anything. Like he knew what my plan was. And I'm sure he was
Funny
like,
to
what?
think of.
He's probably like, why was I assigned to her? She's kind of crazy. Or at least he gets a good laugh out of me. I don't know. But as soon as I thought that, he said, it's not your time and you have to go back. And I popped back in my body so heavily. Like it just was like, boom. And I was devastated. Like I've never been so sad in my entire life because I knew it was like the one chance. I mean, I've been out of my body multiple times, but I always feel like being out of my body was just a reprieve from what was happening. And it was a little bit of a healing time. And it was just a gift, but it wasn't you can stay here forever. But being at that entrance, I think I was at my most critical point then. And there really was that chance to stay and I wasn't given it. And I was
Yeah.
mad. I was really mad. And the funny thing is I could still leave my body, but I did never get to go back to that point.
Where you were close to the entrance
Yeah,
to
yeah.
heaven. Yeah, there's also you talk about your interactions or your interaction with Jesus. Tell us
Mhm.
a little bit about that. And then I want to hear about how this all affected you on the other side of it. How did you go back into regular life again
Yeah,
after all
yeah.
of this?
For sure. Yeah. And there was a couple of other experiences, but so I was in my hospital bed and so this was over 3 weeks this was happening, and I was in different rooms. I was in the shock trauma, med surge, the heart and lung ICU, critical care unit. And so I could tell you which room I was in based on where my bed was, but I was laying in my bed and I had my family there one day. And my dad had taken FMLA. He worked for the federal government, and someone was with me at all times because they were called in so often for emergency surgeries and stuff. And my parents were there. And I said to him suddenly, I was quiet. I was unventilated at this point. And I said, there's Jesus in the window. And they're like, what? What? Where? And I'm like, right there. He's just watching us. And my mom, was like, what's he saying? I'm like, he's just watching us. And it was this immense love, like God. But he looked different than him. He was darker, darker eyes, darker hair. The beard and um, scruff and stuff was darker. And so I knew that it was him. I knew. And I've had people say, "How did you know?" I just did. I don't know how to explain it. And he just watched me for a few minutes. And at first I thought he was coming to get me, and I was so excited.
Mm.
And then I realized that he was just there, almost like he was checking on me and providing comfort and love. And then he was gone. He was only there for a couple of minutes.
Wow.
My mom said that that gave her the most comfort that she needed, to know that if I did pass away, that I was protected and that I wasn't going to be alone on the other side. And that kind of gave her the ability to be okay with it. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously you don't want to lose your child, but when they're like that, you're praying for something to happen to either help them or end their suffering. And so
Yeah.
that was really comforting for her to know that there was more going on behind the scenes than what they could see.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was kind of it was a cool thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I can really appreciate what you're saying about like, how do you know that it's Jesus, or how do you know that, and it I've had these experiences too where it's like not only are you seeing, but you're feeling.
You're
It's
remembering.
it's the feel, yeah.
Yeah.
It's the remembrance, it's the feeling, it's the yeah, the
Like
tug
if
of
I
your
hadn't seen my parents for 10 years and suddenly they showed up, I would know who they were. And for me, it was just a homecoming. I had known these two energies before this life. And so it was like a hey, welcome back type thing, you know?
yeah, that's
Um,
awesome.
but yeah, as I started to
Me,
heal,
go
I,
ahead, sorry.
as I started to heal from this, um, I it went, you know, after about 3 weeks, I couldn't leave my body anymore. And that was really, really hard because it had been such a lifeline. Like I would watch my dad reading his book, and when he wasn't watching, I'd pop out of my body. And it was kind of a game in a way. I mean, you get really bored and you're in a hospital and you can't move or anything. And so I'd see he wasn't watching, and I just kind of pop out and stand to the side.
Mhm.
And you know, the pain's gone, so of course you want to be out of your body and stuff. But my family was very aware of what was happening. My husband at the time, I asked him when I was writing the book, "What do you remember?" And he said, "I remember that you would be like you weren't moving. Your eyes were just like staring off into space, and then suddenly you go like this, and you were back, and you look around frantically, and it was like you're trying to acclimate to being back in your body, and you were just very confused where you were." So
Interesting.
yeah, they were really aware of what was happening.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Very interesting. Any other experience that I'm just going to encourage everybody to get your book and read because you
there's a
added
lot.
all this into this story, and it's such a beautiful book too. Miracles from the Other Side.
Yeah.
Miracles from the Other Side.
And it
Um,
really was a miracle that it saved me. I mean, I truly know that I could not have saved that because at one point, when I was, you know, at my sickest point, I found myself over this green grass area with trees, like big oak trees, and there were white tents down below. And there were doctors. I was with my guide, always with my guide, and we kind of like floated down towards because I wanted to see what was in there. I'm a curious person. And there were two white tents. They were quite large, and underneath were tables with doctors in white hospital um, jackets, and they were reading these huge medical books. There was petri dishes, and just you could tell that they were very, very busy. And I was watching them, and they weren't noticing me. And the funny thing is, it never bothered me that no one acknowledged me that was around. Didn't seem weird or anything, but they were just doing their own thing. And as they worked, my guide said to me, "They don't know how to save you. They don't know how to heal you. It'll be through faith and prayer alone that you survive." And
mm,
I truly, truly believe that because I had so many prayer groups going for me. And the doctors would always say when they go in for the surgeries, "Not sure what we're going to do when we get in there. We don't know what we're doing, but we'll figure it out," which is kind of scary.
mm.
But they really did not know what to do with me. And I had multiple surgeons. They had so many residents that would come in every day and shadow my care because they had never had a case like this.
They
And
love unusual cases.
yeah, they do. Like it would
Like
not
I
be
can learn
unusual to have like
something.
dozens around me. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was kind of weird at the time. Like, you know, it was just a different situation. It was probably good for them. They're getting a lot of understanding of weird hospital cases, like medical stuff. So it's a good
Mhm.
teaching tool. But yeah, I truly feel that when surgeons go in for surgery, their hands are guided by the other side. And even when I was with the two angels ministering in the hospital and they would put their hands on the shoulders of the patients and the family, you could see this light of love and healing go towards them. And then they would take the patient home with them if they were passing away. So there's so much more happening on the other side than we know. And gosh, if we could just see the love that is felt for us. This is a really hard life. And I think you can talk to anyone and they will say it is hard. And sometimes I wish that we got a little bit more of that magic in our daily life. But yeah, there was a couple more experiences. But as I started to heal, um, I wasn't able to leave my body again, and it was really, really hard because I was still very sick. I had to learn how to talk again once they took the ventilator out. And I had a lot of scar tissue, tons of surgeries, 13 abdominal surgeries. They put me in this transitional care unit as I started to heal to really help me learn to walk and talk again. And I hated it. So eventually my mom said, she's been here a couple of months. Can we take her home and have 24-hour care, have a nurse in the home to help with her and see if she'll recover faster? And my doctor did agree to it. So I went home in the end of February and I was back in March. I had a blood clot, but I started to kind of heal a little bit. And by July of that year, they decided to do the surgery to remove the colostomy bag. And so they did a couple of pre-surgeries to get me ready for it. And then in August, I had the colostomy bag removed and they hooked up the J pouch, which is really a medical miracle when you think about it. If you Google the surgery, it's amazing what medicine can do to save someone.
Mhm.
And of course, I had, all kinds of problems with it. I had a big hole that opened in my stomach, and eventually I did heal from that. But over the next year and a half, I learned to walk again. My hair had fallen out, it grew back in. I got stronger and I was doing really well. And I had one more surgery to do. The scar was over my entire stomach from top to bottom, and there was a hernia. And so I knew I needed one more surgery to get rid of the hernia and also to fix the scar and bring it down. And we're going to do like a C-section scar to get rid of all the massive scar tissue underneath. And so I scheduled that. And about the time that I'd scheduled that surgery, I was sitting there watching TV one day and I had this voice of my guide say to me, your body can't handle a healthy pregnancy and you're going to have to adopt. And I was
Mm.
like, yeah, that's for sure. There's no way I could ever handle a pregnancy. And so the goal became to have this last surgery and then do foster care until I was old enough to adopt from Guatemala. And I was pretty healthy at this point. I'd really worked hard to get to a good place. And so we scheduled the surgery the month before we did all the foster care classes. It was during the Olympics in Utah, 2002. And so in February, we did all the training classes. It was like 40 hours, I think. And then the next month, I scheduled the surgery. And I did it in an outpatient treatment, like a surgery center, because I was so afraid they were going to keep me in the hospital. And
Hmm.
I had the surgery and it went good. And I went home and it kind of went downhill. I got pockets of infection in my stomach and I started
No.
getting the high fevers. And I knew by this point I was done with denial. I knew I was very sick. And so I called the on-call surgeon and said I need to come back. And I felt exactly how I had before when I had the abscesses that they had removed. So I knew that it was pretty critical we get it taken care of pretty fast. So my mom said, can we have someone from the local church come give you a blessing first? And I was like, yeah, that's cool. So they came to the house and I'm laying in my bed and they give me a blessing. And then they're talking to my husband and my mom is sitting next to me on the bed. And suddenly I felt my soul float out of my body. And I was like, oh gosh, this is it. I gotta leave. I've completed whatever it is I need to do and I can go home now. And I said to my mom, I'm leaving my body. It's time. And she's pretty sad about it, but she just sat with me and held my hand. And my husband is talking to the men, has no idea what's happening because I'm whispering to her. And I was out of my body for a few minutes. And then I had this communication with my guide that said, this is the last time that you'll leave your body and you'll heal after this. And very, very gently and slowly, I could feel my soul float down into my body and reunite again. And I thought, what a gift. It had been, about 2 years since I'd been able to do that. And so after they left, I stood up to go get to the hospital. And I went to the bathroom to grab some supplies, and my stomach, a hole opened up in my stomach, and all of the infection gushed out like a river. And
Wow.
as it did, I could feel the fever just like leave my body little by little, and then it was gone. And I felt so strong and healthy. And I called my doctor and I said, I think we're gonna wait. I feel okay. I think all the infection's out. And I had the J tubes that, that they attach to your body to get the infection out as well. So he said, okay, I trust that you know your body, and we'll have a checkup tomorrow or whenever. But the infection did leave. I That was the last surgery I ever had, and I started healing at a massively fast rate. That surgery was March 11th, and on April 23rd, the next month, we got a call for our first foster child.
Mm,
And gosh, she's an amazing, amazing little girl. And she ended up going to family. And then the third child, I got a call that he was ready to pick up. And I'd had the call I got from him originally was for two children. They said, we're putting you in committee for both children. It
hmm
was a little baby girl and then this 22-month-old little boy. And so I knew there was a possibility that maybe one or the other would come as either a foster care placement or a legal risk. Legal risk basically means if they can't return to family, then we would be a backup as a adoption. But family is always first as reunification.
Right.
So I'm shopping in Mervyn's. I have a newborn baby foster. And as I get this call, I hear the voice of my guide say it's going to be the boy. The baby's going to go to a family that has her 2-year-old sister. And I was like, okay. But I didn't want to what if I do get the 6-week-old baby? So I said to the lady, the worker, put our name in for both in the committee. And so she did. And I got a call it was November 7th, and they said, you've been chosen for the little boy. So I go and pick him up at what's called the Christmas Box House. It's a shelter in Salt Lake City, Utah.
hmm
And it was winter. He had a hat on and a puffer coat and these little tiny size 4 K-Swiss shoes that were white. I mean, he was tiny. He was like 19 pounds. He was so cute. So I get him home and I pull off his hat and take his coat off. And it's like this blonde hair wings out everywhere. And it stopped me in my tracks. That was the boy, younger, but that was the boy that was in the hospital.
Wow.
I was shocked because up to this point, I didn't know who those children were. And so I at least knew who the little boy was. And we fostered him for a year and a half, not ever knowing what the outcome would be. And I never tried to jinx anything because I really felt I I really had a love for his mother. And so I was her cheerleader as well as knowing that I had to be his. And wherever he went, I wanted him to be safe. So I really developed a good relationship with her, trying to make sure that if he did return home, that he would be safe and loved. And ultimately, did end up adopting him. And we chose to do an open adoption. And he's 25 now. And his mom is still a part of our life. I love her so much. I'm very, very grateful for her and her family. And so that was just amazing to know that this little soul that had visited me a couple of years before, who was not even born when I had my surgeries, suddenly he's my son. And so as the years kind of went by, a year or two, I thought, I wonder if that little girl is one of the children that I will adopt. And we had two failed adoptions of little girls, and then one of a little boy. And so I started asking my guide and praying, where's this little girl? Is she coming? Like, I'm confused. And I very clearly heard him say, it's not time yet, and it's okay. And so it kind of took away the worry, and I quit worrying about it. And then one day I woke up and I just knew. And I'd had this happen a couple of times with their foster kids. I would wake up and know that they were coming. I'd have this very strong feeling to get ready for them before they came. And so I knew that I was getting a child that day. And so not telling anyone, I just started getting the room ready. So we had a boy and a girl room. And I got a call that evening that we had been chosen for a little girl, and it was her.
Mm.
And so when I picked her up, she was 11 weeks old and 11 pounds. She had like orange peach fuzz hair and very sickly looking, like she was
Oh.
healthy. And it was a legal risk, but we'd been told that she'd probably go with her mom pretty soon. So I really didn't think that she'd be staying. But a couple months into us fostering her, her mom took me aside and said that she had had an experience when she was pregnant that she knew that she would not be raising her and it would be someone else, and that would be me. And so we did adopt her, and her parents are no longer with us. And it's been hard to not have them here on this earth, but I just loved her family, and I was so grateful for that experience to get to know them. And she still has my daughter still has quite an extended family that's here, and so I'm always going to be grateful for open adoption in our life and for these children that I feel like I'm sharing with their birth families. They're not fully mine, and I'm okay with that. I'm just grateful that we get to have this gift together to raise them. Even though I'm, the one raising them, they are still fully involved and they love them just as much. And that's important to me that my kids know where they came from. So
Yeah.
a beautiful experience from this.
That's amazing. And it's really like I don't know if you can see how like
Yeah,
emotional that's making me because I have a grandson who was adopted
we get it.
from from foster care, and I have another son and his wife who are in the process of adopting from foster care. And so just hearing that story and seeing the way that they came into our family and the miracles that came along with those experiences, I can really appreciate
Yeah,
what you're
it's
sharing.
amazing. And I will say foster care is a hard thing.
It
It's
is
not
hard.
all rainbows and puppies.
Yeah.
These
Yeah.
kids have trauma. And so there's an added layer when you're raising children that have abandonment or
Yeah.
trauma, different exposures and stuff. So it's not easy for anyone. And so you have to find a support group of people that understand. And so I always made sure that I had that group around me that understood what
Yeah.
I'm going through and could give me the support I needed with that. But yeah,
Support and the guidance and
yeah, 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 I am grateful for adoption. Um, it's the open adoption worked for us and it doesn't for everyone else. Sometimes there's safety issues in the way, but I think if you talk to adults, they're adopted a lot of times they want to know where they came from, and it's not a slight against their adoptive family. They need to have that a connection and
yeah,
understanding of their DNA.
makes sense because we all want that. We all want to
Yeah, yeah,
understand where we came from and who we are and
yeah.
what we are. Heather, your story is just remarkable. And, we don't have a lot of time left, but I would love for you to share just briefly how you connect with your guide today, like what that looks like for you ongoing, and anything else you want to share before we go.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I feel like he's always been with me, and I think that we all have a guide. I didn't understand it beforehand, but I can look back now and think, okay, there are moments that he was there protecting me, and it's kind of like when someone says, "Oh, I had a gut feeling I needed to do this, and it saved me," or a gut feeling for that. I think that's our guides, and there have been multiple times throughout the years that I've heard his voice, and sometimes I'll be driving in my car, and all of a sudden I can just hear that communication, and so it's random and it's kind of fun. Like sometimes they're like, "Well, you've been gone for a while. Welcome back," as a joke. And I definitely feel it around. And there have been times that it's been so strong. Like, I mean, there's a couple of examples of driving. I live in the mountains, and it's kind of it's not a safe area to drive in the wintertime. We get a lot of snow, and there have been times that I've very well known that I cannot drive because something might happen, and there's been accidents that I could have been involved in. Or one time I was driving kind of far, and I knew that there was going to be an accident on the way back, and I assumed that I needed to be very careful because it was such a strong voice. There's going to be an accident on the freeway. Like, you need to be careful. You need to be aware of what's going on around you. And so I was very aware and I was driving, and suddenly this car is like coming at me on the freeway going like probably 90 miles an hour. And without even thinking, I pulled into the lane next to me. And I don't know what this car was thinking, but it hit a bunch of cars, and there's vehicles like flying all over the freeway. And I narrowly missed by an inch this car. It would have killed me, the way he was hitting the vehicles. And so I always listen to this guide. And again, I think we all have them. We just kind of need to listen. Um, it's more strong sometimes when I'm alone in my car or if I'm in a quiet place, like a meditation or just by myself. And so sometimes if I need that reassurance or that communication, I'll just listen to soft music and turn off my rap music or whatever. But I still pray all the time. I think it's very important. And I've just had too many experiences since to discount it. I have a friend that passed away 2 years ago next month, and we were really close. She passed very, very unexpected. She was in a coma for a week.
Wow.
I'd been to the hospital to visit her quite a few times while she was in the coma, and I was distraught, like totally distraught about the fact that I was going to lose this friend. And I was laying in bed one night, and I suddenly felt this warm. It was almost like when I healed from my last surgery when the fever went down, but I felt this like warm glow just like scan my entire body and then wrap around my body. And it was this immense love again. And as it's scanning my body, I'm feeling the sadness leave, being replaced by love. And then I looked at the clock and it was 1:11. And I have this thing with angel numbers. And I was like, well, that's fitting. She knew that those were my numbers. And then I closed my eyes and I had this dream where I was in her hospital room with her with my mom, and she was sitting with me. She was glowing, so healthy, and she was really sick at the end. And she said, I've been to the other side. I've seen God and I've seen mountains and I've seen beautiful stuff." And I said, "I want you to tell me all about it." And so in my, in this dream, I'm trying to grab a pen and paper to write down what she told me. And as she's telling me this, I hear my guide so strongly say, she is going to decide whether she stays or goes. And either way, you are going to be okay. And he's very adamant, you are going to be okay. And I knew at that point that it was her decision. And no matter what I prayed, it would be okay for her. And
Hmm.
she did pass away a few days later. And I feel her around quite a bit. I always joke
Me
with
too.
her. But yeah, there are so many amazing things that are happening around us that we don't see. There's so much love. And again, this is such a hard life. And so I feel like we need to grasp onto the positives in it instead of focusing on the negatives and the hate and the just there's so much hate out in the world right now. And so if we can find these groups of people that have these positive energies and surround ourselves with them, it's going to make this life easier. If we can give service and love to others, I think that's so important. If you see someone that's struggling, help them. They, maybe they're afraid to ask or they just need that extra love. And so I think this really, we're sent here to give love to others and to help them, as we're struggling through this together and also receiving the blessings.
Mm. Wow. Well, Heather, thank you so much for taking your time to share your story. And again, I'm just reminding everybody to go find your book, Miracles from the Other Side, and share with us how people can connect with you.
Yeah, so you can go to heathervandermeyden.com and there's a link to buy the book, but there's also podcasts on there and there's a connect button. So you can, or contact, you can send an email through the contact and I'll respond if I get it. I always respond. So I've met some fun people. A lady in Germany, we've been talking this week.
Oh, that's
It's been fun. Yeah. The book's kind of gone international and I never ever expected that. I really wasn't planning on writing it. And then our friend Lynn Taylor, he
mm,
told me I needed to write it. And so I thought, okay, I'll write it for my kids, my family. And so I really am surprised it's published. There are some really amazing things that happened during the writing of it that we don't have time for, but
yeah.
it was meant to be out there. And there's been a lot of outpouring of love over it. I think it's helped people to know that they're not alone and that there is love, and we don't need to be afraid to die. I think there's a huge amount of people are afraid of dying, and really for me, it's just like we are still our same soul energy. We're just in a different um, frequency, I guess you could say, and we
Yeah.
need to see all our loved ones again when they join us once we take our last breath. So you don't need to be
Amazing.
afraid.
Amazing. Yeah, one of the things I always ask my guests is how do you um, connect on a daily, weekly basis with your spirituality? And I think you've answered that question with prayer and creating that those silent moments where you can hear your guide and
And I
yeah.
hike a lot. I find when I'm in nature, that is when I feel the closest to the other side. And so I try to in the summertime and when it's warm. We have snow right now, and I don't hike as much, but Yeah, I try to go out in nature every single day, even if it's just to sit in the sun on the front porch. I think that being outside nature grounds us. Even just walking in the grass with bare feet kind of
Yeah,
gives it that extra little love push.
I think so too. And it's just you are a miracle. You are a miracle. Your story is miraculous. Your healing is miraculous. Your life is miraculous, and the miracle of sharing your story and bringing that light to others. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you for having me.